What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we are now ready to take our partially assembled chassis, our finished transmissions, put them together. We're also going to add some churros, the outside churros in this step. But before we get started, we of course have to give our special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this possible. All right, so we need, of course, our transmissions, and we need the frame because we're going to put those two together now. Make sure you have the extra bolts left over from when we assembled the transmissions. These were the longer ones without that nylon patch. We're going to use that to mount those. We also have a churro kit in the box. So that's a bunch of these smaller churros. We had the big long ones that we cut and attached to the inside of the frame. These go on the outside of the frame. So we're going to go ahead and attach those in this step as well. Tool-wise, we're going to need that 5/32, either handled or Allen wrench, or both, whatever you prefer. We'll need a 3/8 wrench and or socket, and we're going to need that 1/2-inch wrench when we get to the churro step. So first things first, let's get these transmissions mounted. Kind of the sooner you can get these mounted, the better, because we don't really want to leave this open for stuff to get stuck inside anyway. So we're going to line this up. The big axle here is going to go through the bottom hole on our chassis. So big axle goes through the bottom hole, and that big bearing is going to fit perfectly in that hole. Then we have the small one, which is going to go in this top hole and hopefully fit perfectly. Remember that the chassis, the frame, the long side here, the side with 2 rows of holes, should be facing up. That's the top of the robot, which means the shorter flat end with the little divot is also facing up. The longer flat end and the side with 1 hole is facing down. That's our down. And on the transmissions, remember the round side is the bottom and the flat side is the top. So flat side to the shorter flat side, that long axle going through the bottom there, and we got to kind of wiggle it a little bit to line up. There are the bearings that have to line up, but also on the sides of our transmission there are little pegs which are going to fit into holes here to help us keep that lined up as well. So we just got to line everything up, and it should sit in nice and flat. And you'll know it's right because these should match. The bit of the transmission and the bit of the short side here should line up perfectly. Also, the bushings won't fit if you're trying to do it wrong, so you won't be able to get very far. Now, for this one, what's interesting is the back hole, the back of this hole, we're going to take a bolt and we're going to go through this hole here. But the back side of it, in the transmission housing, there's actually a hex cutout. So we don't need our 3/8-inch wrench for this step. If you just take the nut and slide it all the way into the housing, it's going to fit in there perfectly, and that is going to keep it locked down. So I'm just going to be able to tighten this bolt in, and usually you do have to make sure you don't push it through, so you want to keep and hold. I'm using my thumb back here to hold that nut in place so it doesn't go too far out. At some point, the bolt will be tight enough that you can just move your hand and finish tightening it up. All right, so that one is in. It's good. And I'm not going to super tighten it yet. I want to get all 4 bolts started, and then we'll tighten them down. So we're going to grab another one here, and we'll do the other top. So I'm going to put that nut in the backside, start sliding the bolt in, and then we can tighten that in. Okay. And on the bottom, if it helps, you can go ahead and flip it over. Ooh. Just so you can see what's going on here. And then it's the same thing. We'll make sure it fits nicely in. Put that nut into the hex-shaped hole in the back and tighten it in. And the last one for this side. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and snug down all the other ones that I left a little bit loose. Get them all nice and tight. Okay, and here, before we go on to the next step, we want to make sure that this can spin comfortably. So you can try to spin it with your hand. Mine is actually going. Feels pretty good. If it can't move with your hand, grab your 1/2-inch wrench, and if you put that onto the output shaft, you should be able to work that back and forth like this. And you should feel it spinning nice and smoothly all the way around. You're basically feeling to make sure that it doesn't catch anywhere. If you feel any snags or catches, if it feels like there's one point where it just kind of gets stuck and you have to kind of like pull really hard to get past that point, what you're going to want to do is take the bolts off, look in the transmission, see if there's any bits of aluminum or other metal or something that got stuck in there. And if there is, right, clean that out and then reassemble it and try again. So sometimes bits can fall in there when you're assembling it, or when maybe if you left it on the shelf for a day and came back and assembled it the next day. So those kinds of things can get caught and you'll feel them kind of snagging and binding. But mine looks good. So we're gonna go ahead and attach the other one. And I think, let me flip it over so we're right side up again. And we'll go ahead and attach this one facing the other direction so you can see the opposite view of what's going on. Once again, lining it up with the holes, getting those bearings to go in, and the little plastic pins are lined up. Good. Okay, and the nut, again, will fit right into this little spot. And then we can pass the bolt through and get it started, and then tighten it in. And I gotta kind of hold on to that back because I could push this through too far and it stops catching, but now it's in far enough that I don't have to do that anymore. And once the first one's in, everything gets even easier. So once again, we'll put a bolt in on the back here. Can start it first few threads by hand. That's something that's always good to do too. If you start the first few threads by hand, you'll feel if it's going in the right spot and it's threading in correctly, versus what we call cross-threading. If you try to do it and start on an angle, you can actually end up kind of cutting new threads instead of using the ones that are there. And that's bad. So if you can feel it starting with your fingers and it starts going nice and smoothly, then you know you're in good shape. So let's flip this sucker over. And we got 2 more bolts here to do on the other side. All right, let's make sure that's in where it needs to be. There we go. So, whoop. Get this one started. Actually, what I'll do here is I'm going to get the other one started first, too. And tighten it in. So we're doing this step a little bit differently this time, and that's something to keep in mind. There is no like one right way to do this. You could go through and finger tighten all of them and then come back through and use the tool. You can do, the one at a time like we did on the other side. There are lots of answers and lots of techniques that all work. So it's just about finding what works best for you. So I'll go through and I'll snug all these down, make sure they're nice and tight. And once again, we're going to check this transmission. So let's see. Guess we can check it this way. I'll put that 1/2-inch wrench on and just kind of spin it around. That feels nice and smooth going that way. Let's go the other way. And smooth, it's not, it's not just freely spinning. You can kind of feel the motors. But you're looking for points where if you get it started spinning with a certain amount of force, you're looking for points like there where it catches just a little bit. And that one was, maybe there was something there, but now working back through that same spot, I don't feel it anymore. So I think it's okay. So sometimes you kind of can work through it a little bit and see where it's tight and not tight. Another thing that you can do with these, I typically have not, and a lot of teams skip that step, but you can wear in the gears. So if you have the ability to power the motors, you could actually hook them up, power them up, and just run them for a bit. And that'll sort of wear the gears in a little bit. Any burrs or manufacturing defects that are on there usually get worn out in that step, and that smooths out your transmissions as well. But these feel pretty good, so I think we are ready to move on to our churros step here. So let's get that bag of churros and open it up. And this is going to be a slight difference to the instructions for the Kitbot. Actually, already our other churros, one was supposed to be higher up and one was down. We moved them both to the bottom Everything that we're moving is so that we have room when we build our like superstructure that's going to have the shooter on it. And we need to use some of the holes for that. So we have to move some other things around to make it work. So what we're looking for here is on the outside edge. Let's find the holes we're going to use here. So on this outside edge, if we find the kind of the big long transmission that's sticking out here, okay, and we're going to go off to the side. There's one big hole in the line. If you go to the next big hole that's sort of lined up with that, so you can kind of go from this one out to this one. If you go in to the slightly smaller hole, that's the one we're looking for on this side. And if we go straight up from there, this second one is where we're going to attach another churro. Now on the other side, it's a little bit different though. So if we go to the other side, the first hole is the same. So we go big hole to big hole and then back to this first diagonal hole here, or this first smaller hole here. But the second one we're going to use has to be not the one that's straight up from that, because that we need to save to attach our shooter structure later. So we're going to continue straight out on the frame until we get to the next that size hole. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so these two are in tight on this side. This one is in the same spot, but then we jump out a little bit to where we're going to attach that one. All right, so let's go ahead and attach them. If you remember, the churro pieces use these quarter 20, I believe, self-tapping bolts that will screw in and kind of set their tap. Remember, you can do it with the socket, and we need the 1/2-inch wrench. All right, so we're going to go ahead and attach it. I'll start with this bottom hole down here. So I'm going to bring the bolt in from the inside of the frame sticking out. Make sure when we attach the churros, they're pointing in the same direction as our output shaft here. We'll have another piece of metal that's going to come in that's going to mount to the outside of this. And then this will sort of stop the whole thing from crushing together. It'll give us more strength in our frame. So I like to just see if I can get it started by hand just so it holds in place. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. I'll use the socket on the inside and just try to twist the outside by hand. And if you can get it like just stuck there a little bit, then it gets easier when you take the wrench because things aren't falling apart. And we're just going to start, well, nope, it fell apart anyway. All right, here we go. We're just going to start twisting this. And I'm just trying to hold it as much as I can by hand to get it started. All right, there we go. I think now we're making progress. So basically, just keep going till it is all the way tight. Watch out as you're turning stuff, this edge, right, just like we talked about with the last set of churros, that edge is a little sharp, so you don't want to rub your hand against it. So I'm keeping my wrench hand out a little bit. And just keep going. Get it back on there. There we go. Okay, and that one is tight. So that takes a little bit of effort. It's not too bad. Getting it started is kind of the hardest part. But again, just like we did with the other churros, if you have power tools, you can use those to save some time. So let me switch back over to my driver here. And once again, with the driver, we have to be extra careful because when we get started, if I try to hold this by hand, that driver, when it bites in, it's gonna make it start to spin around. And if my hand is holding it when it starts to spin around, then the edge, if it's sharp at all, could cut me. So I'm gonna be really careful. Just get it started a little bit and then get the wrench on there. And I'll kind of hold it with my hand too, just to keep it lined up. And then we can just drive that in. Looks good. And I'm not gonna over tighten it with the power tool. I'm gonna always kind of just try to do that last little bit with the hand tools. Okay, let's go over to the other side and get our other two churros in here. Okay, So let's do the bottom one first. Okay, switch over, get the wrench on there. All right, and let me do that last little bit of tightening now. Looks good. Okay, last one for this side is this hole. So it's not the same, right? This side, they're close in. This one is out a ways. Okay. Let's go ahead and drive that one in. And the last bit, there we go. All right, so this side looks good. Now we'll go ahead and flip it around. And what we have to do is we have to make sure we do it the same way. So I'm going to look at my pieces on this side, right? The churro pieces on this side. And I'm going to go across and make sure. This is the weird one here. This is the one that's a little bit farther out. So right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and it looks like we basically just follow this inside churro along. And we'll get our hole marked here. So it's going to be this hole here. And then the other ones are easy because the other ones are all where we expect them to be. So then the next one is from here into this, again, we go out big hole to big hole and then back to this smaller hole here. I guess the one closest to the little corner down here. Then same thing on this side, the one closest to that corner. And then on this side, we already took care of the one that had to move, the far out one. So this one we just go straight up to the other hole that's right there. Okay, let's go ahead and attach our last 4 churros. Once again, make sure they're on the outside of the frame. That is hopefully started enough that I can hold on to it. There we go. Okay, and trying to stop when it's still just a little loose, so I'm not overdoing it. This hole, right? There we go. Looks good. Other side. Okay, let's do the bottom one first because it's harder to get to. Alrighty, last one. This time it's the closer in hole. Looks good. All right. And the good news is with these churros is if you have to take them off and put them back in, you've already kind of cut the thread in them, so it gets easier and easier every time you have to work on them. Now, we are done assembling the transmissions to the frame. We've got the extra churros attached. We actually have to take a break on finishing the frame. So the instructions for the Andy Mark stuff will now say you can put the wheels on, you can put the outside frame member in and hook everything up together, but we can't do that yet because again, we're gonna need to drill some holes on the inside here. We're gonna wanna trace a hole, we're gonna wanna drill another hole there. It's gonna be easier to do that without all of the wheels and stuff attached. So we're gonna stop now on our frame assembly and switch over to actually start building that shooter structure that's gonna build up on top of the frame of the robot. So good job with the transmission assembly. We'll see you in the next video, but before we go, I wanna give a special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this possible.